So we'll do new. This will be test 3. All right, and let's go from manhole A to manhole B. It's the same thing as what you did with the tray, so I'm going to go ahead and use a 4-inch conduit. The cable database has all of all of your cables listed here. If you don't have your specific cable listed here, you can certainly enter the information manually like we did earlier. So I'll just do, maybe let's do 1.1. I don't have my conduit information with me. Let's do, I don't know, point. Here, let me grab my info. Hang on one second. All right. So actually, I'm going to do 1.41. And pounds would be 1.875. And we'll run 3 cables. And we won't add another cable. Okay, and then lubricant. So when you're in a conduit system, you definitely want to use lubricant so you can pull your cable further safer. We've got a couple different cable lubricants. We have Polywater J. It's been around for a long time. Works great. Wonderful, great, lubricant. It's red bucket. You may have seen it on job sites. Polywater NN is our lubricant plus silicone. That's a great lubricant to use in water-filled conduit systems. Very difficult pulls, long pulls, a lot of bends. You'll definitely want to use Polywater NN. We have Polywater LZ. LZ is our universal lubricant. It's safe to use on all cable jackets. It was originally designed for low smoke, zero halogen cable jackets, CSPE, CPE cable jackets, kind of those fire rated jackets. It is the only lubricant out there that's really safe to use on those types of jackets. And it was originally designed specifically for those jackets, but the more testing that we did, we found that it was compatible with all cable jackets. So if you're pulling cable in a conduit and you're not exactly sure which lubricant to use, you can always turn to LZ and be assured that it's safe for your cable jacket. So we'll go ahead and we'll stick with LZ. We'll do a PVC conduit and we'll just do an XLPE cable jacket. So we have a low end lubricated coefficient of friction of 0.06. Now these low end numbers are based on testing that we've done in our lab. And in our lab, it is room temperature, conduits clean, cable jackets are clean, and we're using the right amount of lubricant. So clearly that's not field conditions, because field conditions, you can have dirt in your conduit system. Your cables could be sitting out in the yard and the sun's been beating on them all day. That cable jacket could be sticky, could be the middle of winter where you pull that cable off the reel and it doesn't want to come, it wants to stay in that coiled position. It doesn't want to straighten out. So those would be some different scenarios you'd want to consider on your project on where to go with that coefficient of friction number. Our sales team spends a lot of time out in the field with contractors. We spend a lot of time with engineers. We spend a lot of time with owners of these projects. And so we have a kind of a general idea of what you could use. So maybe for this particular situation, instead of a 0.06, we could maybe do a 0.11. Maybe not quite double it, but you'll definitely want to take into consideration your field conditions. And then we also will test those same lubricants and jacket and conduit material and pull unlubricated. So if you were to do this particular project, the coefficient of friction for an unlubricated cable is 0.46. So it just kind of gives you a range to work from. Now, cable manufacturers, they will tend to recommend a 0.35. That's generally what I hear. And that is, in this case, would be a very, very conservative number. It would be a little bit higher than what you really need to go. So I'm going to click OK. And again, we got the back tension. I'm just going to go ahead and do 0. And you saw in the last, well, I'll go ahead and I'll change that in this one too, if you're going to break it up. So let's take a look at some information that's available here. So we've got our pull description right here. We have our conduit information. We have a conduit fill of 37.3%. So we are below NEC code. So this can be pretty valuable information. It will also give us the configuration of our cables. In this particular design, our configuration of our cables is cradled, and that's where your 3 cables are sitting flat on the conduit system. And then jam clearance analysis can be pretty important because right here it's telling us that jamming is probable. So what could possibly happen is those 3 cables will line up side by side around a bend and get jammed. And that, of course, you don't ever want that to happen. So what you can do if you don't have any of your conduits purchased yet, if you don't have your cables purchased yet, then you can make necessary changes. So let's go ahead and let's change our conduit from 4 inches to 5 inches and let's see what happens. Hit enter. Okay, jamming is no longer probable and our conduit fill is now 23.9%. So let's go ahead. We're going to do a very simple pull. We're going to go from the top. We're going to go from manhole A to manhole B. Our cable reel is going to be right above that manhole. So we'll go ahead and we'll add our first section here. Our cable is traveling straight down. Okay, the gravitational direction is down. We'll go 10 feet. Our first bend is going to be a horizontal bend. It's just where that concave of that bend is in the upward direction. Our bend direction, our cable is traveling down and through that bend, and we'll do a bend radius of 30 and a bend angle at 90 degrees. So then we'll keep going. We'll enter in our next section. You'll notice here that our tensions, we have a -56 and a -14. That's just gravity working in our favor at this point. So we're going to go ahead coming out of that first bend and we're in that conduit system. We're going to travel 500 feet. We go ahead and we'll do a horizontal bend. We'll do a 3-foot 90. Coming out of that horizontal bend, we'll go straight. We'll go 300 feet to our next horizontal. And then coming out of that second horizontal, we'll go ahead and we'll go straight and we'll go 50 feet. And now we're going to bring our cable up and out of that conduit system. So it's going to be a vertical up. Our cable is traveling up through that bend. Our bend radius will be 3 and it's a 90 degree. Okay, so now we're just going to account for our cable coming up and out of that manhole. So we're traveling at a 90. It's going up. We're going 10 feet and we have a no bend. So that's a pretty simple pull right there. So you'll notice here that our ending tension is 1,159 pounds. Our sidewall pressure max in this design is at segment 4 at this bend right here at 200 pounds per foot. Now, this first horizontal was only 83, our second horizontal was 153, and then of course our third is 200, the highest. Don't ever want to add any of these numbers together. So if we wanted to know if this pull, if our tension would be lower if we were to pull from manhole B to manhole A. So right now we're at 1,159. Down in the left-hand side here, we'll go to reverse segment. And it does lower our tension. So we're at 946 and our maximum or our ending sidewall pressure is 161. So if you have the ability to pull from the opposite direction, again, in this scenario, you would want to do that. We'll go back to our segment input edit tab. Now, again, if you wanted to change this cable information, you can just click on it, right click, delete your cable and insert your cable. You could also add new cable. Now in this scenario, we have 3 cables and those 3 cables are all the same size. So if you happen to get some cable that is braided or bound together from the manufacturer, you can go ahead and click this triplex button and it will recalculate everything down here based on a triplex cable. But this triplex option will only work with 3 cables that are the same size. And then here is our backward calculation tab. Again, if you can get the ending tension off of the pulling equipment, once the cable has actually been pulled, you can go in here and you can change it. Let's just say you've got 600 pounds. You could put in 600, press calculate, and then you get a field coefficient of friction of 0.07. Additional info that's available under the information tab. So we have a lubricant recommendation, how much lubricant to use. So for this particular job with a brand new conduit or a good conduit system, it would require 10 gallons to pull the cable in. The program defaults to good. So if you are working with a fair to poor conduit system, you can click that and it will give you an additional recommendation of how many gallons of lubricant you should use with a fair or poor conduit system. We also have the lubricant specs available in the program. You can just click here, and this is our technical data sheet that has tons of testing information available in here. We also have a spec if you needed to have a spec to, put into a job, or if someone needs a specification for one of the lubricants, that's available to you on that tech data sheet in the blue text. Feel free to copy and paste that. We also have our lubricant catalog numbers and package options available on that last page of the tech data sheet. So we have, we have quart size, we have gallons, 5-gallon buckets, drums. We also have lubricant in a bag. They're called a front end pack. And those are really nice if you want to pre-lube your cable. So if you've got a very difficult pull or a long pull, or your conduit system is really not a good system, you could pre-lube that conduit system by buying these front end packs. You would tie that front end pack to your pull-through rope, and you would go ahead and just cut open that bag as it enters the conduit system. And our lubricants are stringy, so they are going to adhere to the side of the conduit, and they're just going to keep running through your conduit system, and it's going to coat your conduit. And then you could go ahead and lube your cable as well. So then you'll have a little extra lubricant for maybe a real difficult pull that you have to do. For pull reports, we have two different options for a pull report. We have an Excel spreadsheet, and then we have a Word document. So you just click on this pull report with the clipboard, and it's going to bring up your Word doc. Now, this report is really easy to work with. You can make tons of notes in here anywhere you find necessary. Just put your cursor wherever you want on this report. You could go ahead and you could add your name. You could add the date, you could add your company logo. You can also make any changes in here. So if you wanted to add any additional notes for conduit condition poor, maybe you want to say water filled. Maybe your client wants you to use a steel elbow. We do have a utility company out east that they will only use steel elbows. So we've got our PVC conduit, so you could do elbow steel, and then just go ahead and print it and save it as a PDF. Now, if you do happen to come across a situation where you're using a different material for your elbows, you can change the coefficient of friction on the elbows to account for that, just for that different material. So right here, let's just say we'll do rigid steel and XLPE, so we have a 0.13. So I could go ahead, I'm going to do cancel because I want my information to stay the same, but then I can come in here, oops, I'm sorry, I have to change that, and do a 0.13. And then that'll change just that section, will change the coefficient of friction. So you've got our two that are changed here, but you notice these here are still 0.11 and the straight section is still 0.11. Now, if you do this, and if you happen to come up here underneath the toolbar, this field here, if you make a change here, oops, boy, 11 would be pretty tough, wouldn't it? 0.11. It's going to change all of your coefficient of frictions and going to reflect what you've put in here. If you wanted to flag, so you get your ending tensions or your max tensions and sidewall pressure from the cable manufacturer, you could go ahead and flag it in this program. You would just click the maximum tension sidewall pressure icon, and we'll put in 150. And then the program will flag where you've exceeded that tension or that sidewall pressure. You can continue to use the program. It's just showing you that you've maxed out. And you can do the same for maximum tension. And then it just flags it for you right here. And then to get rid of those flags, just come up here to the maximum sidewall pressure field highlight, put in a 0, hit enter, and the same with the maximum tension. You needed to change your back tension. If they decide that, nope, we're going to have a back tension, it's going to be 100 pounds for us to pull the cable off the reel, you can go ahead and make that change here, hit enter, and then all your tensions and sidewall pressures will change based on that back tension change. And that is how we would run a cable through a conduit system.
Thanks, Wendy. That was
Yeah,
awesome.
that was really quick.
Well, let's go into the hard one first, I guess.
Right, exactly. Does anybody have any questions?
I do. If you're running a very long run above ground and you've got to put in conduits or pull points, is there somewhere in there that says, okay, there's a pull point? So if we want to see which direction would best suit what our needs are, is there something in there that you can add pull points?
So, forgive me, let me just see if I understand. Um, so are you thinking like where maybe you would have to do a splice, but you're thinking you might have to do
Say,
one there, but maybe you won't?
not a splice. Say there's too much tension and for what the cable can take for
Okay.
pulling, say it's too much, right? So you
Mm,
can't do the whole pull at one time. So
okay.
then you got
Add a
to figure out,
segment.
okay, I need to split this up and pull this portion first, and then pull off whatever's left, and then back pull the rest to the
Oh,
original starting
well,
You
location.
add a segment.
Yeah.
yes, I know what you're saying. Well, you would actually probably want to do a new pull. So because you'll want to know what your tension is going to be for that second part of or that second half of your conduit system. Because you would actually be, if we're not bringing our cable up, I'm just going to delete this segment. Okay, I'm going to change this section to a no bend. Okay, so our cable is still just, it's a couple of horizontal bends and we're still going straight into the conduit system. And maybe right here, this is the spot where you're going to, I'm assuming you're going to maybe coil it or do like a figure 8 or something with your cable, just a bunch of slack. And then you'll reattach your tugger and then you'll grab that slack and you'll start pulling that, right? Is that is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Okay. So because you're starting over, I would do a new pull
Okay.
because then you'll know exactly what your tension is going to be for that second section. Now, I would highly encourage you to enter the entire pull into the pull planner and just see if it works for you, and then, go from there. Because you could separate it, so you can delete these segments. So let's say that, let me do a couple more here. You got a horizontal 390. Oops, here is that input not valid message. All right, so I'm going to do OK. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to do a right click. I'm going to delete it, and then it'll be gone. Enter in that section again. So let's go 200. Let's keep going. Do a 3 and a 90. And then let's go ahead and let's go 600. We'll do another horizontal 390. 200. Okay. And we'll do a no bend. That's where maybe we're thinking maybe we have to stop after this horizontal bend right here. Okay. So what you can do is you can delete these 3 segments right here, do a save as, and then you come back to the same pull up the file again, and then you can delete your first 3 segments and do a save as with just these 3 segments. So you don't really have to re-enter the information. You can edit this and then just save as a different file name. Does that make sense? So let me, yeah, so I've got this one saved. This one is my test 3 pull. So I'm going to just delete my first 3 segments. Okay, so here's the second half of my pull. So then I can just go up here and do save as, and then I have test 3, and I'm just going to say this is my second section of Conduit, and then save it. Okay, now I want to go back and I want my pull report for the first section of my pull. So I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to pull up my original pull that I entered. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete my bottom 3 segments. And then I'm going to do a save as, and I'm going to do my first section of Conduit. Okay, so now I have the full pull right here that gives me a tension that maybe is higher than what the cable manufacturer specs out. So then I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to pull my cable through my conduit system this far, and then I'm going to stop. I'm going to resituate. I'm going to hook up to the next part, and I'm going to pull for the second part of my conduit system, and that would be this section here. I hope that makes sense.